Tom's books because and so they're here. A lot of it is just just so the bookshelf looks like it's got some books. But I have a reading list somewhere. All the the Austrian economists have written good books that you people should look at, and Ayn Rand's written books, and there are a lot of books that focus on free market capitalism that people can read. Of course, they can read my dad's books if you can get them. Some of them are at shiftbooks.com, but some of them you got to buy just used, on Amazon or eBay from other people who are selling their copies. Some copies you can just read online. I think some of the books are available. You can just read them on the internet. You don't actually have to have the physical book. Eric Somerville, can you help us understand what more stimulus will do to the U.S. dollar and the economy, and what would you expect the Fed to do over the next 4 years? Look, I expect the Fed to keep doing what it's been doing, only more of it. And the reason they're going to do more of it is because it doesn't work. And it's just like any drug addiction. The more drugs you take, the more drugs you need to take in the future. You build up a tolerance. And so if you want to get high, you need even more of it. And that's what they're going to do. And the Fed is going to keep on prescribing larger doses of the same toxic medicine until the patient overdoses and dies. And that's the collapse of the dollar. And that's where we're headed. Now, the question is, what happens after that? What happens when the dollar collapses? And again, a lot of that may depend on who's in office at the time and what policies they pursue at that time. I don't know. I'm going to hope for the best, but I'm going to plan for the worst. But I think regardless of whether we get the best or the worst, I think the dollar has to lose a lot of value. Even under the best case scenario, it's going to lose a lot of value. Even under the best case scenario, gold's going to go up. And I think my foreign investments are going to outperform domestic investments, even if we get the best case scenario. Of course, if we get the worst case scenario, then the returns will be even better, certainly in relative to what people would have in the U.S. But I think regardless of what happens, I think I've done the right thing. And so I'm going to continue to maintain these positions in anticipation of those events. Oh, there's a big call coming on Fox. Let me see what this is. So they're finally calling Trump to win Florida. It seemed like Trump was going to win Florida for a while, but I guess there wasn't an official call until now, or maybe there was, and it was on a different network, and I didn't have it on. But I would have been flipping back and forth between CNN and Fox. But I think that I think it was assumed that Trump was going to win Florida. I think if Biden had won Florida, that would have been a major upset had Biden won Florida. But it was in play. Florida was in play. And it's not a blowout. They're showing Trump is 51.3 and Biden is 47.8. So, it's pretty close, but it's not a squeaker, so. Here's a question from Depreciated Luke. I ended up with a lot of Bitcoin by accident. By a lot, I mean hundreds of thousands. What do I do? That's a pretty nice accident. I'm not really sure how you accidentally come into possession of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin. But what I would do if I accidentally came into possession of those Bitcoin is I would purposely sell them. I would take advantage of that gift and sell the Bitcoin and do something else with the money. If you want to invest it, you could, buy, gold or gold mining stocks or foreign stocks. But I would definitely sell. But I'd be interested in how you accidentally acquired them, because that's probably a more interesting story. See, I accidentally lost mine, but I didn't have that many. And I was gifted them. I didn't actually, purchase any of the Bitcoin that I lost. Actually, I didn't lose them. I know exactly where they are. They're in a wallet that I can't access. So they don't actually do me any good. It's the same as not owning them at all. Anyway, Corbin Meredith, can you explain the mechanics of QE? Well, yeah, I mean, the QE is very simple. Quantitative easing is what it means. But the mechanics are the Federal Reserve buys assets, treasury bonds, mortgage bonds, corporate bonds. And where does, I mean, the Federal Reserve buys them. And where does the Federal Reserve get the money? Well, it just creates out of thin air. So the Fed prints money and then uses that money to go into the market and buy these assets. And so now the Federal Reserve takes those assets that it buys and adds it to its balance sheet as an asset. And now the dollars that it created out of thin air, the Federal Reserve notes, are now a liability on its balance sheet. But now those Federal Reserve notes are an asset to whoever used to own the bond that was sold to the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is taking bonds out of circulation and holding them on its balance sheet and putting its liabilities, Federal Reserve notes, into circulation and increasing the money supply. And so what the Fed is effectively doing is turning debt into money, which is why it's called monetizing the debt, which is exactly what quantitative easing is. That's what it's always been. Even though Ben Bernanke refused to admit that it was debt monetization, even though he went to Congress and lied and said that the Fed was not monetizing debt, that was exactly what the Fed was doing. And that's exactly what they continue to do. And that's why they're going to destroy the value of our money, because that's how money is always destroyed, fiat money. Central banks monetize government debt to the point where the money collapses in value, and that's where we're headed. Peter, what's my take on the global derivatives market crashing? Look, there is tremendous counterparty risk inherent in this highly leveraged system. And that's one of the reasons that the Federal Reserve continues to flood the market with liquidity, and other central banks as well, in order to prevent all of these chickens from coming home to roost. And so at the end of the day, again, I think it's the currency that ends up failing. That is the big threat, is the value of the money. So it's not so much that your counterparties don't pay, it's that your counterparties pay in money that doesn't buy you anything. Aaron Goldstein, if the freedoms and the standard of living falls too much in the U.S., would you consider moving out? Look, everything is on the table. I hope I don't have to leave the United States. I hope I don't have to leave Puerto Rico. I actually love living in Puerto Rico. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the lower taxes is just icing on the cake. I mean, the cake is the fact that I actually like living in Puerto Rico. I enjoy it here. I enjoy the culture. I enjoy the people. I mean, in fact, a lot of that would be lost if Puerto Rico became a state. Forget about the fact that the tax advantages would be lost. A lot of the culture. There's 50 states. I mean, there's not that many territories. So there's a lot more uniqueness to Puerto Rico the way it is now. Not that it doesn't have room for improvement. It does, of course. It just would have a lot less room for improvement if it became a state. But yeah, no, I don't have any desire to leave the United States or its territories or to renounce my citizenship. That doesn't mean that at some point I may have no choice but to do that. But yeah, I mean, anything is possible for the future. Peter Schiff, when will you run for the presidency? This comes from a Canadian who obviously couldn't vote for me. Yeah, I'm flattered that a lot of people comment on, my videos or send me emails that they would like me to run for president. Unfortunately, there's not enough people out there that want me to run. I mean, there are a number of people who would like me to run, and I mean, I could get, hundreds of thousands of votes. Well, who knows? I may be able to get millions, but I mean, you need a lot more than that to win. And that is the problem, that, my appeal may not be broad enough for me to be elected president. I mean, I can run for president, but, is it a fool's errand? I mean, to me, I don't want to run for president as a publicity stunt. I would only run for president if I actually thought I could win.